Hey everyone, what is up? This is Ete with another episode of Eco Lawn Science. All right, so today we're talking about weeds. There's a lot of different types of weeds. There's different classes, there's different species, there's different categories. And so my goal with this episode is kind of a rough overview just to kind of teach you enough to make sure you're going in the right direction. I'm sure you've all seen this, and I just saw it the other day. I was driving through the neighborhood here in Heber, and I saw these big yellowish dead spots all over where they had weeds. And what happened every year, I see it, and I almost go, how could this ever happen? But it happens a million times a year. People grab the wrong product. They grab a non-selective, like a Roundup product, to spot treat the dandelions or the clover in their lawn, and they grab the wrong one, and they basically killed it. Now they have to start over. So my goal today is to try to help you to avoid that and not do that. So when we're talking about weeds, we're going to start at the very basic place. What is a weed? A weed is really, it's just it's an unwanted plant. It could be, in South, they use Bermuda grass as lawns. They love it. Here in Utah, the only time you'll see Bermuda is on a golf course. If I see it in a lawn, it's technically a weed, so we want to kill it. So weed really, it could be something to one person, could be desirable, or they want to keep it. But to you, and this is about you and your property, it's really just something you don't want in that area. That's the basics of it. And so the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure you can ID the weed. You've got to identify the weed. If you just see a weed, so let's say you found out it's, you don't want it there, so you can say it's a weed, and you go to the store and there's a million products, and they're all made to trigger and to kill the weed in different ways. And so if you grab the wrong one, like my example earlier with the guy that grabbed Roundup to kill a dandelion in his lawn, you're going to do more damage than good. You're going to have a higher, pollution and toxicity. So you've got to start with identifying what is the weed that I'm trying to target. And because there's so many different weeds, they've broken it up into, we'll call them classes. And I think there's actually more than this, but because this is for people here locally, we're going to focus really what we see out there. So the three main classes that I see are broadleaf weeds, grassy weeds, so annual grassy weeds, and sedges or nut sedges. So I'm going to jump into those for a bit. So the broadleaf weed category, those are your more typical lawn weeds. So your clovers, your dandelion, henbit, oxalis, wood sorrel, spurge, thistle, dyer's woad, all of those. And there are, I don't actually know how many there are. Wild garlic, onion, all these things. There's probably hundreds of them here, and you don't have to know those. You really just want to know the main ones that you see more regularly. And it's all about the same. There's about 15 of them that you'll see, and once in a while you'll get one that doesn't fit into that category. But the most important part is you need to understand that is a broadleaf weed. So that when it's time to control it, you grab your broadleaf weed control, not your non-selective weed control. So the broadleaf weeds, if you just look at the word for a second, you've got broad and leaf. So it tells you that these things they leaf out. These are like leafy, meaty kind of plant-looking things. And so your broadleaf weed control will kill any of those. So think about a dandelion. Everybody knows that. Or a clover, right? Clover stays low to the ground, but it just leafs out. It has those big leaves. Anything that has leaves on it will be killed by your broadleaf weed control. Now, there are some exceptions. I'm not going to talk about those today, but 9 times out of 10, you see a weed in the lawn, if you know it's in the broadleaf class and you line it up with a good broadleaf weed killer, you're going to have success. So again, they leaf out things that are unwanted, even if you have like ivy. If you were to get it on bushes, so let's say flowers or plants that are growing in your lawn, or aspen shoots, any type of tree shoots, because it leafs out, it has a leaf, it's not a grass, that'll work. So we'll start there. So there's your broadleaf category. The second category is going to be your grassy, your annual grassy weeds. These are weeds like crabgrass is probably the biggest example, and that's the biggest weed that everybody's afraid of. If you think about a crabgrass and take a look at this picture of the crabgrass, notice it doesn't have the big, it doesn't leaf out like that. It's just the grass. It looks like grass. So if your lawn is a bluegrass lawn, which most lawns here in Utah are, and you see these big fat blades, little hairy, and they're connected down at the root, that's a crabgrass. Now, the reason you need to ID it is because if you have crabgrass and you grab a broadleaf weed control, so weed control that kills dandelion is not going to kill crabgrass unless it's a combination and there's multiple active ingredients. So there's a few of these grassy weeds that it will take care of, and there's not a lot. There's only about 5 or 6 of the grassy weeds that you can actually kill with that second grassy annual weed class. But the crabgrass is the biggest one. So you have to make sure, again, if you've got big, fat, leafy grass and you're like, this doesn't look like the rest of my lawn, and you start looking at it and you go to ID it and diagnose it and you realize this is not it, oh, this looks just like crabgrass, you need to make sure you have the right product, which would be more of a quinclorac. Again, you won't see crabgrass in Utah until now. It's starting to see it, so July, late June through September. But you got to make sure you grab the right thing. The third grass class is the sedges. So they call them nut sedges. There's yellow nut sedge. There's tons of them, but they're mostly the same. They have these little, almost these little nuts at the crown of it, and you can see them. They grow really fast and really tall, and they're thick and hardy. And when you look at this picture, you'll see it's not a crabgrass, it's not a broadleaf weed, and it's a sedge. And so with the sedges, there's a whole nother class of products that will treat only the sedges. Again, the product that treats the sedges is not going to kill your broadleaf. It's not going to kill your crabgrass unless it's a combination. So there are products that can kill all of them. There's one like Q4. It kills 4 different types. So you really have to look at the ingredients. But this was just an overview of just trying to get you an idea of thinking, okay, how do I identify this weed so I can even make the right decision when it comes time to treat it? There's a couple more parts of this. So you have different types. You have your annuals, your biannuals, and your perennials. So your annuals are plants or weeds that have a 1 year or less life cycle. This is important to know when you go to treat. Your biannuals are more than a year, but less than 2 years. And then your perennials are more than 2 years, meaning they just come back every year. And so you'll need to know that when it comes time to grabbing the right product. So when we move over to products, we have our non-selective, our selective, our specialty products. So I'm going to back that up. So our non-selective products, think of the word non-selective. It doesn't select what it kills. It doesn't select what it's going to control. It's going to kill everything it touches. So this is a product like the biggest one that everyone knows is Roundup. Glyphosate is the active ingredient. Roundup is not the only non-selective, but that's the one we refer to because people know it. But there are organic versions like Final Sands, like Avenger. But these products are non-selective. They don't select anything. They can't choose. So if you have dandelions in a lawn or clover and you grab a non-selective, you're going to burn holes in it, right? So the non-selective products you want to grab if you're in areas where you don't care or you want to kill everything. So a good example is driveways, sidewalks, mulched areas, so your flower beds, right? You don't want the grasses, you don't want the weeds in your flower beds, so you would use a non-selective in those areas, or just gravel areas, RV parking, those types of areas. You want to kill everything, non-selective. With a selective, it's the opposite, right? It selects what it kills. So if you have that lawn and the dandelions, clover, or thistle are coming up, if you use a selective, you apply it to the area. So let's say you have a patch of grass about 20 by 20, and there's 15 weeds in there. If you were to spray that whole 20 by 20 down, it will select the targeted weed that you want, as long as it's on the label, the list, and it will not damage or not hurt the grasses below. So you'll want to use that in your lawn. You never want to use a non-selective in a lawn unless you're killing the whole lawn. You would want to use it in areas like native areas. So we do a lot of that in Park City where people have 10 acres of just nice field, and so we would use a selective. And then you move into your specialty products. There's other products that you can spray on flower beds that'll kill grasses only and not weeds. There are products that I've mentioned to take care of the nut sedges that we mentioned earlier. And so anyway, those are the main classes, the main life cycles, and the type of products that you're going to want to use. So again, it's just so important that you understand before you do any treatment, before you do anything, understand ID the weed, or at least ID the class so you can get the right product. Understand its life cycle, so again, it'll help with the product, and then make sure you have the right product, non-selective, selective, specialty. And if you do that, even if you don't know every single broadleaf weed, you'll probably have good success, and you won't waste, you won't have a lot of runoff. And then the last thing is, on any product, I always recommend reading the label if you're ever going to use it. Study the entire label. It will list every weed that this product can control. So there are some exceptions where you might have a broadleaf weed in a lawn, so you want to grab your selective, right? But that particular weed, once in a while, I find one that's not listed on the label. So I either need to look at a different label, or I call the manufacturer and I'll say, here's the weed I'm dealing with, because sometimes there are weeds that just aren't listed yet. It could be a list, 100 weeds, and sometimes it can miss. So anyway, so that's a little bit about that. Thank you guys for tuning in, and hope that helps, and have a great day.